Picture this. You've just said "I do" to the love of your life. Your honeymoon awaits, a chance to celebrate your union in paradise. Imagine turquoise lagoons, powdery beaches, and endless romance stretching before you. But what if your dream getaway transforms into your darkest hour? What if the person who was meant to protect you becomes a source of your deepest pain? And here's where it gets complicated. What if the betrayal doesn't come from your spouse, but from someone equally trusted, someone who should have had your best interests at heart? Can you fathom discovering that your most private moments are no longer sacred? I'm about to share a journey where an idyllic honeymoon unraveled into a web of deception, forbidden attraction, and a scandal so devastating it destroyed everything in its path. Stay with me, because this tale will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love and loyalty. A private bungalow nestled along an isolated coastline, the kind of sanctuary you see in magazines. Gentle waves caress the shoreline while coconut palms dance in the tropical breeze, their fronds creating patterns of light and shadow across pristine sand. The scent of frangipani fills the air, and spectacular sunsets paint the sky in crimson and gold. The perfect stage for romance. This was meant to be Sofia's fairy tale honeymoon, a new beginning with her husband, Marcus. Sofia, a 26-year-old Filipina, had dedicated years to establishing herself professionally. She embodied her family's aspirations, and now she had found a partner who seemed to promise the world. Yet beneath the surface, uncertainty gnawed at her. She questioned her readiness for married life. Though everything appeared flawless, something felt amiss. Her marriage was fresh, her future unclear, and what should have been the happiest time of her existence was beginning to feel suffocating. Marcus, 33, was her polar opposite. Charismatic, self-assured, and accomplished. An entrepreneur who seemed to have conquered every challenge. Yet despite his achievements, something was missing. He remained perpetually fixated on the next venture, the next opportunity. His ambitions consumed him, leaving minimal space for Sofia, and their once intimate connection was starting to deteriorate. For him, the honeymoon represented merely another obligation, something to complete before returning to his empire. Emotionally withdrawn, he barely registered the fractures forming in their relationship. Then there was Rafael, Marcus's father, a distinguished man in his late 50s, impeccably groomed and highly regarded in corporate circles. He had graciously financed their honeymoon, insisting on accompanying them to strengthen family bonds. But Sofia couldn't dismiss the sensation that his presence stemmed from more than paternal affection. Something unsettling lurked in his gaze, something behind those eyes that made her skin prickle. He projected warmth, certainly, but an intensity accompanied it that felt excessive, like something unspoken and inappropriate. He possessed wealth and influence, but it was his ability to manipulate others that made him truly formidable. In this tropical haven, everything seemed perfect superficially, but Sofia couldn't ignore the mounting tension between the three of them. What began as a dream vacation was rapidly becoming a powder keg, primed to detonate. Sofia had fantasized about this moment endlessly. Her honeymoon, an opportunity to unwind, connect with her new husband, and escape the pressures of career and daily life. As they reached the bungalow, her pulse quickened with anticipation. The rhythmic sound of ocean waves, the breathtaking vista from their secluded terrace. It exceeded every expectation. For a fleeting moment, it felt as though they existed alone in the universe. But when she glanced at Marcus, all she observed was a man already absorbed by his phone, fingers dancing across the screen. "Just one quick message," Marcus had said, dismissing her with that effortless smile she'd fallen for. But she understood what that meant. Another business call, another client to appease. She stood there feeling that familiar anxiety tighten in her chest. This was supposed to be their time, their sanctuary, but already Marcus was drifting away. It was then she noticed Rafael observing from the periphery, watching them with a peculiar, almost knowing expression. He had insisted on joining, despite Sofia's reservations. Initially, it appeared to be an innocent gesture, a generous father attempting to bond with his son and new daughter-in-law. But now Sofia wasn't convinced. Something about how Rafael studied her made her uncomfortable. She tried to rationalize it. Perhaps it was just nerves. After all, she barely knew Rafael. He was a successful businessman, but he felt more like a stranger than family. Sofia had always respected him from a distance. But now that they were isolated together in this idyllic bungalow, his presence felt overwhelming. It wasn't just the glances he directed her way, or how his attention seemed to linger slightly longer than appropriate. It was how he moved through the space as though he owned it. Marcus naturally noticed nothing. He was too preoccupied answering calls and working on his laptop. To him, everything was fine. He was pleased to have his father there. And Sofia, well, she simply needed to relax. He reassured her repeatedly, always with that same charming smile. "We're here to enjoy ourselves. It'll be wonderful." But Sofia couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She wanted to embrace this honeymoon, to lose herself in the island's beauty, but the burden of Rafael's presence weighed heavily on her. And the worst part, she couldn't bring herself to voice her discomfort to Marcus. What would she say? That his father made her uneasy. She didn't want to create conflict. After all, Rafael had paid for everything, and it was his idea to include himself. But deep down, Sofia couldn't help wondering if this honeymoon would be something vastly different from what she'd imagined. As days passed, Sofia found herself increasingly isolated, her enthusiasm for the honeymoon steadily fading. Marcus, perpetually buried in business calls and meetings, barely registered her growing sense of abandonment. His phone remained glued to his hand, the constant chime of notifications and steady clicking of his keyboard filling the air while Sofia wandered through the bungalow, aimlessly trying to fill the silence. The island, though stunning, felt less like a romantic retreat and more like a stage where Sofia performed a role she didn't fully comprehend. And when Marcus's attention drifted further away, she found herself turning to the one person who seemed willing to engage: Rafael. He was always there, casually trailing behind her as she explored the island, offering companionship when she needed it most. Rafael's presence became a quiet, constant shadow. At first it was innocent enough, just a stroll along the beach or a shared lunch by the pool. But soon it became evident that Rafael wasn't simply there to enjoy the scenery. He began speaking to Sofia in ways that Marcus never did, attentive, perceptive, and somehow understanding. With each conversation, he gently steered her away from the idealized vision of marriage she had always held. He'd casually mention the pressures of his own past relationships, his voice tinged with regret as he recounted tales of love that once seemed perfect but had crumbled. "Marriage, Sofia," he'd say with a hint of bitterness, "isn't always as beautiful as people portray it. Sometimes you end up sacrificing everything for someone who can't even see you. Or worse, they never even try." Each word felt like a subtle push, eroding Sofia's perfect vision of her new life. She listened, caught between her discomfort and the strange comfort Rafael seemed to provide. It was as though, in his own way, he was validating the emptiness she had started to feel in her marriage. Marcus, consumed by his work, had never once asked how she was truly feeling. Yet here was Rafael, seemingly understanding the struggles she was facing, struggles Marcus had never even acknowledged. As days passed, Sofia began seeking out Rafael more frequently. She would wander the bungalow grounds, finding solace in his company. He wasn't her husband, but in many ways he filled a void Marcus hadn't even realized existed. Rafael made her feel seen, something Marcus, wrapped up in his world of business, failed to do. There was an intimacy in their conversations, a quiet understanding that Sofia hadn't realized she was craving until it was there. Then came the evening that would change everything. It was a warm, calm night. Sofia and Rafael had shared a quiet dinner on the terrace overlooking the beach. The wine had loosened their tongues, and the conversation had turned from casual pleasantries to more personal territory. Rafael had asked about her childhood, her aspirations, her fears, all the things Marcus had never bothered to ask. Sofia found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected, her walls crumbling with every word. As the night wore on, the conversation shifted again, this time to the subject of love. "Love is complicated, Sofia," Rafael said softly, his voice almost a whisper. "It's messy. People think they recognize it when they see it, but sometimes it's the small things, the moments that mean the most." Sofia met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words. Her heart pounded as something shifted in the air between them, an unspoken tension that was impossible to ignore. Without thinking, Rafael reached out and lightly touched her arm, his fingers brushing against her skin. It was brief, but it lingered. And in that moment, Sofia felt a rush of heat sweep through her body. It wasn't just a touch, it was a spark, an undeniable connection that made her breath catch in her throat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world seemed to freeze around them. Sofia felt herself drawn to him, an attraction that felt both thrilling and dangerous. She quickly looked away, but the feeling didn't fade. If anything, it grew stronger. The touch was innocent enough, but it lingered in her mind, becoming something more. Sofia couldn't help but wonder, was this just a fleeting moment? Or was it the beginning of something far more complicated? Her heart raced with guilt. But it wasn't just guilt. There was something else there, something that frightened her. For the first time, she found herself questioning what she wanted, what was real, and what she was willing to risk. And as the evening ended, the boundaries that had once felt so clear between right and wrong seemed to blur, leaving Sofia to wonder if this was a path she was willing to take. The days in the bungalow had blurred together. The lush, tropical paradise outside seemed to mock the chaos inside Sofia's heart. With Marcus more absorbed than ever in his work, Sofia had found herself seeking refuge in Rafael's company more and more. Each shared moment with him, though innocent at first, seemed to pull her deeper into a web she wasn't sure she wanted to escape from. The bungalow, once a symbol of blissful escape, now felt like a battleground, her emotions torn between guilt and an unexpected pull toward Rafael. It happened one evening when the moon hung high in the sky, casting a soft silver glow over the bungalow. Marcus had disappeared once again into his world of business calls, leaving Sofia alone in the vast house with Rafael. This time they weren't on the terrace or by the pool. It was just the two of them in the quiet solitude of the living room. The air was thick with unspoken tension. They had been talking, just as they had countless times before. But tonight the conversation was different. There was something charged in the air, something that made Sofia's heart race. She couldn't quite pinpoint when it shifted, but the shift was undeniable. Rafael wasn't just listening to her anymore. He was watching her. His eyes, once kind and warm, were now filled with something else, something darker, more intense. Rafael leaned in slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "Sofia," he whispered, his voice hushed. "You don't have to pretend. I can see how unhappy you are. I know what it's like to feel invisible." Sofia's breath hitched. For the first time since arriving, someone truly saw her, felt what she was feeling, and in that moment, her heart ached for the attention, the connection, the validation she hadn't felt in weeks. She had tried so hard to be the perfect wife, but it felt as though Marcus had stopped seeing her entirely. "Rafael, Sofia started to protest, but her words were lost when he gently cupped her face with his hand, his thumb brushing over her skin. The touch was tender, but there was a depth to it, something that felt dangerously intimate. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest, unsure whether she should pull away or lean in. He tilted her chin up, and their faces were so close now, their breaths mingling. "Sofia, this is just a moment where we can be honest with ourselves. Nothing more." "Let it happen," he murmured. Without warning, Rafael closed the gap, his lips pressing against hers. At first, Sofia's body reacted instinctively, her mind screaming to stop. But the chemistry between them was undeniable. The warmth of his kiss, the way he held her so closely, made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in a long time. She tried to pull back, but his arms held her tighter. And before she knew it, she was kissing him back, caught in the whirlwind of emotions she hadn't known she'd been holding back. It was a kiss full of desperation, confusion, and longing. For a fleeting moment, Sofia forgot about everything. The wedding vows, the guilt, the shattered pieces of her marriage. In that moment, it felt like she was finally being seen, finally being wanted. But reality crashed back in like a wave, cold and unrelenting. She pulled away, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Her hands were trembling as she tried to steady herself, staring at Rafael in shock. "No, no, I shouldn't have." Rafael looked at her, his expression soft yet assured. "Sofia, don't overthink this. It's just a moment of weakness, something that happens when you're not getting what you need. And right now, I can see you need this. Someone to truly hear you, to see you." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his voice soothing and calm. Sofia felt her resolve cracking. The guilt was there, weighing heavily on her chest. But so was something else. A rush of freedom, a feeling alive again. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel neglected. She felt seen, wanted in a way that Marcus, consumed by his world, had never made her feel. But she couldn't ignore the battle inside. Was this a temporary escape from her marriage? A moment of weakness, as Rafael put it? Or was it something more? A sign that she was drifting further away from the man she had promised to spend her life with? Rafael's words lingered in her mind, his calm demeanor wrapping around her like a safety net, making her feel like she had found someone who understood her. For the first time, she didn't feel like a burden. She felt like she mattered. Yet in the deepest part of her soul, Sofia knew this was dangerous. But the question echoed louder with each passing second. Was she willing to risk everything for this fleeting moment of connection? The line had already been crossed, and there was no turning back now. The days that followed were a blur of confusion, guilt, and longing. Sofia tried in vain to push away the memories of that kiss, the feeling of Rafael's lips on hers, the way he had held her close, making her feel as though she was the most important person in the world. But each time Marcus's attention shifted to another business call or his focus drifted back to his laptop, Sofia found herself spiraling back to the bungalow, seeking out Rafael once again. She told herself it was just a temporary distraction, just a harmless escape from the emotional neglect she'd been experiencing. But every time she saw Rafael, something deep inside her stirred. He was always there, waiting, ready to listen, ready to give her the attention that Marcus had forgotten how to give. Rafael didn't push her. He never pressured her for more than she was willing to give. Instead, he simply provided the kind of presence Sofia desperately craved. It was during those quiet, intimate moments, when she poured her heart out about her frustrations with her marriage, that their bond deepened. He would sit with her on the bungalow's terrace, his eyes locked on hers as she spoke, listening intently as she voiced the things she couldn't tell Marcus. The small cracks in her marriage that had been building for months suddenly felt bigger, more undeniable. "My husband, he doesn't even see me anymore, Rafael," Sofia confessed one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. "I try to reach out to him, but it's like I'm invisible. All he cares about is his work, his deals. I don't even know what we're doing here anymore." Rafael nodded, his expression a mix of empathy and understanding. "You're not invisible, Sofia," he said softly, his voice steady. "It's just that sometimes people get so caught up in their own lives, they forget to appreciate what's right in front of them. But I see you, I hear you, and I won't forget that." The words struck something deep within Sofia, and for the first time in weeks, she felt truly heard. The loneliness that had been eating away at her began to ebb, replaced by a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. But with that warmth came a surge of guilt, a reminder that she was married, that she had made promises to Marcus. Still, every time Rafael reached out, whether it was a reassuring touch on her shoulder or a compliment about how she'd handled herself during a conversation, Sofia felt herself drawn closer to him. Her feelings for him, once uncertain and fleeting, began to solidify into something far more powerful. The more time she spent with Rafael, the more she felt like the woman she had been before the wedding, strong, confident, and in control of her own destiny. Their secretive encounters became more frequent, slipping between the cracks of the bungalow's peaceful facade. When Marcus was busy with his calls or buried in his work, Sofia found herself seeking solace in Rafael. They would walk along the beach, their footsteps leaving imprints in the sand, or share a quiet dinner when Marcus was unavailable. Each moment with Rafael felt like an escape from the suffocating silence that had fallen over her marriage. But the guilt never fully left. It gnawed at Sofia's insides, a constant reminder of what she was doing. She wasn't just betraying Marcus. She was betraying herself, her own values, and the very marriage she had promised to build. Yet each time she stepped away from Rafael, the loneliness returned, reminding her of what she lacked at home, what she had lacked for months. Marcus's indifference had created a void, and Rafael, with his constant attention and understanding, had filled it. Despite the guilt, Sofia couldn't deny the undeniable pull she felt toward him. Rafael listened in ways Marcus never had, responding not just to her words, but to the unspoken emotions that lay beneath. He offered advice, comfort, and affection, things Sofia had desperately needed. His presence began to feel essential, something she couldn't easily walk away from. One evening, after another emotional conversation, Rafael leaned in closer, his voice low and inviting. "Sofia," he said gently, "I know this isn't easy, but what's happening between us isn't just about attraction. You're feeling something real, and so am I. We don't have to pretend anymore." She stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. For a moment she wanted to pull away, to stop this before it went any further. But in his eyes she saw something that made her want to stay, to keep feeling seen, to keep feeling alive. "I never meant for this to happen," Sofia whispered, her voice shaking. "But I feel like I'm losing myself in my marriage. And you make me feel like I matter again." Raphael's smile was soft, knowing. He reached out, gently taking her hand in his, and held it there for a moment longer than necessary. "You matter, Sofia. You always have." Their hands lingered together, the warmth between them undeniable. Sofia's internal conflict raged, but in that moment it felt like everything she had been searching for had come to the surface. A connection, validation, a sense of belonging. And as their private moments became more frequent, their bond deepened, but so did the weight of her guilt. Sofia didn't know how much longer she could walk this fine line between desire and shame. She could feel the growing attachment to Rafael, something she had never experienced with Marcus. Yet in the back of her mind, a voice kept whispering that this path would only lead to more heartache. But for now, all she could do was feel the pull of Rafael's presence and try not to think about what it was costing her. The honeymoon that had once promised relaxation and joy now felt like a cage. As days passed, Sofia felt increasingly trapped between her growing attachment to Rafael and the guilt gnawing at her every time she looked at Marcus. The emotional bond she had formed with Rafael deepened, and with every secret encounter, she felt herself slipping further away from the man she had married. But despite the overwhelming pull of their connection, there was always a sense of dread hovering over her. She knew it couldn't last forever. Someone was bound to notice. Marcus, it seemed, had begun to notice. At first it was subtle, a shift in his demeanor when he caught Sofia and Rafael talking a little too long by the pool, or when their conversations seemed to linger longer than they should. Marcus's attention had been divided, as it always had been, but the cracks were starting to show. He noticed how Rafael would always appear just when Sofia seemed the most distant, how their exchanges had grown more personal, the way they both seemed to share a certain chemistry he couldn't quite place. Marcus didn't want to admit it, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. There was a growing tension between him and Sofia, one that he couldn't ignore. Their late-night dinners had become silent affairs, interrupted by the incessant ringing of Marcus's phone, while Sofia sat quietly, her eyes unfocused, lost in thought. When they did speak, it was about trivial things, small talk that never touched on the deeper issues lurking beneath the surface. Marcus couldn't remember the last time they had an honest conversation, the last time he'd really seen Sofia, not as his wife, but as the woman he had fallen in love with. Sofia, for her part, was struggling. Every time she caught sight of Rafael, every secret moment they shared, she felt a rush of excitement, an escape from the emotional desert of her marriage. But guilt was always there, lurking in the background. She was betraying Marcus, the man who had once been her everything. He was the one who had promised to love her, to build a life together. How could she have let it get to this point? Her feelings for Rafael only complicated matters. She wanted to believe it was just a fleeting moment, an affair born out of loneliness and desperation. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. Every time Rafael spoke to her, every time they touched, it felt real. He made her feel desired, seen, things Marcus had stopped making her feel months ago. But as much as she tried to convince herself it was temporary, that she could go back to the way things were with Marcus, she knew the truth. She wasn't the same woman anymore, and she wasn't sure if she ever could be again. The tipping point came late one afternoon when Marcus caught them. He had been working in the bungalow's office as usual, buried in his phone calls and emails. But today, something was different. He had a nagging feeling in the back of his mind, a sense that Sofia had been slipping away from him. When he heard the familiar sound of voices drifting from the garden, he paused. One of those voices was Sofia's. The other, it was unmistakably Rafael's. Marcus stood in the doorway listening. He didn't mean to eavesdrop, but something compelled him to stay quiet, to listen just a moment longer. What he heard made his stomach tighten. Rafael's voice was calm, almost soothing as he spoke to Sofia. "You don't have to hide from me, Sofia. We've both felt the distance, the emptiness. But you deserve to feel alive again, to be seen. I see you. I hear you." Sofia's voice wavered in response. "I never wanted this to happen. I never wanted to hurt him, Rafael, but I don't know what to do anymore. I feel so lost." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He wanted to burst in, to confront them, but he couldn't move. He stood frozen in the doorway, each word sinking deeper into his chest. Rafael's reply was gentle but firm. "You don't need to explain yourself to me. You need to make a choice, Sofia. You deserve something real. You deserve more than just what he's been giving you." Sofia hesitated, her silence louder than anything she could have said. Marcus could hear the weight in her pause. It was a moment of truth, one he hadn't prepared for, one he hadn't wanted to face. But it was undeniable now. Something was happening between them, something he couldn't ignore any longer. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest as he watched Sofia disappear down the hallway, her steps frantic, her face stained with guilt. The silence in the bungalow was deafening, every moment stretching painfully as the weight of the truth crashed down on him. It was too much to process, too much to bear. His hands trembled as he tried to steady himself, the crushing realization sinking in. The two people he trusted most had betrayed him. A deep, guttural rage began to simmer inside him. The shock of the revelation had worn off, replaced by a burning, uncontrollable anger. He had given everything for this marriage. He had worked tirelessly to build a life with Sofia. But here she was, turning to his own father for the very love and attention he had failed to give her. "Sofia!" he shouted, his voice thick with fury. He stormed through the bungalow, each step a pounding drum beat, echoing in the hollow silence that followed her exit. He reached the living room where Rafael stood, calm, collected, almost detached from the storm raging inside Marcus. Rafael's eyes locked onto his son's with a quiet confidence. But there was no escaping the tension in the air. The betrayal, the lies, they hung between them like an impenetrable fog. Rafael knew the confrontation was coming. He had seen it in Marcus's eyes the moment he'd entered the room, but he didn't expect the full force of his son's wrath. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Marcus growled, his voice thick with barely contained anger. Rafael's face remained unchanged, his voice low and steady. "Marcus, this isn't what you think. You think I'm blind?" Marcus cut him off, stepping closer, his fist clenching. "How long, Rafael? How long have you been screwing around behind my back?" Rafael took a slow breath, his posture unfazed by Marcus's aggressive tone. "It's not like that." "Don't you dare!" Marcus roared, stepping closer, his rage blinding him. "You slept with my wife, my own flesh and blood, and now you're standing here pretending like everything's fine." In an instant, the emotional dam broke. Marcus swung his fist, the sharp crack of his knuckles against Rafael's jaw reverberating through the room. Rafael staggered back, his surprise fading quickly into cold anger. He wiped a trickle of blood from his lip, his eyes narrowing. He had expected this moment, but nothing could have prepared him for the raw, primal fury of his own son. Rafael shoved Marcus back, sending him crashing into a chair. The bungalow, once a serene paradise, now felt like a battleground. Every piece of furniture became a potential weapon, every word a trigger for an all-out war. "You don't know what it's like, Marcus," Rafael shouted, his voice rising with frustration. "You don't know what it's like to lose everything, to be ignored, to watch your marriage crumble under your own damn arrogance." Marcus lunged at his father, his fists swinging, hitting Rafael with all the pent-up pain and betrayal he had been carrying. The two men collided, falling to the floor in a violent tangle of limbs. Sofia, hearing the commotion, rushed back into the room, her heart racing with panic. She tried to scream, to call out, but the sight before her stopped her in her tracks. "Stop! Please stop!" she cried, rushing forward to pull them apart. But it was too late. The anger had overtaken both of them. The fight escalated quickly, blows exchanged with reckless abandon. Rafael, despite his age and size, fought back with a strength and desperation that stunned Marcus. The violence grew savage, fueled by years of unresolved resentment. But as the chaos unfolded, neither man seemed to notice the sharp edge of the coffee table behind them. It happened in a flash, a misplaced punch, a sudden twist. Rafael lost his balance and crashed against the table. The corner of the glass shattered, and in a moment of agonizing violence, a shard of glass embedded itself into Marcus's side, cutting deep. Sofia screamed in horror, her heart racing as she saw Marcus stumble back, blood pouring from the wound. He collapsed to the floor, his hands clutching at his side, his face contorted in pain. "Marcus!" Sofia rushed to him, her hands trembling as she tried to stop the bleeding. But there was too much blood, too much damage. Marcus's breath came in shallow gasps as he looked up at her, his eyes wide with shock and pain. I didn't mean for this," Rafael muttered, his voice filled with a mixture of regret and disbelief. He reached out, but Sofia slapped his hand away, her eyes wild with panic. "Get away from him!" she screamed, her voice breaking. But it was too late. Marcus's breathing slowed, his eyes fluttering shut. The weight of everything, the betrayal, the anger, the loss, finally caught up with him. He had given everything for this life, for this marriage, and now it was all slipping away in front of his eyes. Sofia knelt beside him, her hands stained with his blood, her body frozen in shock. She couldn't process it. She couldn't comprehend what had just happened. How had it all gone so wrong? How had this one moment of weakness, this one betrayal, led to the destruction of everything she had ever known? The bungalow, once a place of beauty and escape, now felt suffocating, haunted by the echoes of the violence that had unfolded. Sofia's mind raced, but it was too much guilt, too much loss. There was no going back from this. Her marriage was destroyed. Her husband was dying, and the man who had been like a father to her was now standing frozen, guilt-ridden in the corner. The aftermath was a scene of pure chaos, blood staining the floor, the weight of unforgivable actions hanging in the air like an impenetrable fog. Sofia sat there shaking, unable to grasp the irreversible consequences of what had just transpired. The dream vacation was no longer a paradise. It had become a nightmare, a prison of guilt, anger, and shattered trust. Marcus's life hung in the balance, and Sofia knew deep down that nothing would ever be the same again. What had started as a honeymoon, a fresh start, had ended in bloodshed, and there was no way to undo the damage. The tragedy was complete, and now only the echoes of their broken lives remained. The days after Marcus's death felt like an endless blur of grief, confusion, and overwhelming guilt. Sofia could hardly breathe. The bungalow, once a paradise, now seemed like a prison, its walls closing in on her with each passing hour. The tragedy had shattered everything: her marriage, her life, her sense of self. And now there was no escaping the consequences of her actions. The police arrived shortly after the incident. The authorities, faced with a scene of chaos and bloodshed, conducted their investigation into Marcus's death. The evidence didn't tell the whole story. There were no signs of foul play, no obvious motive for murder. After a thorough examination, the authorities ruled Marcus's death a tragic accident, a result of a physical altercation that spiraled out of control. But the whispers, the ones Sofia couldn't escape, told a different story. The affair between her and Rafael was the unspoken truth that lingered in the background, haunting everyone involved. It was clear to those who knew them, especially the people closest to her,